Hello and welcome back to another episode of the GCSunscast. It's the round 19 edition, and unfortunately we don't have too much to talk about because Gold Coast lost to Carlton by 35 points. As embarrassing as it was, my good friend Tom has managed to crawl out of bed to join me on the podcast tonight. G'day Tom, thanks for joining us.
Mate, the sun's briefly shone for a week in dreary old Melbourne's winter. And then, unfortunately, the clouds have come over because we are rubbish again.
Yes, we barely struggled to kick a score at all there. After the first 3 goals of the game, Carlton then, I think, responded with the next 10 or something. It was just ridiculous. The final score was 5 goals 14-44 to Carlton's 12 goals 7-79. Wright was the only multiple goal scorer for the Suns with 2 goals. Now, a couple of big talking points in this game was Swallow got concussed quite badly in that first quarter by Patrick Cripps. And it wasn't so much the incident that caused the concussion, it was just the way Swallow looked afterwards. It was really sickening seeing him just trying to fight to get back on the field, and obviously he knew where he was because he wanted to get back out and play football, but at the same time I don't think he could quite stand up, or it looked like he had vertigo almost.
Well, the commentary said that after he recovered from that initial sort of period of concussion, he was told how he behaved and shown a bit of a replay, and Swallow's comment, even whilst still concussed, was that he said he looked like the drunk bloke at a party that doesn't want to go home. So I hope it's he's had a few concussions in his career, but I hope this is just one of those things where he goes through the protocol, and if he has to miss a week, he has to miss a week. You don't mess around with concussions. I think our club doctors are pretty bloody good at assessing concussions. They've certainly had a lot to do. It shows how tough Swallow is, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. He's one of the hardest men at the club. The injury report came out today, and they said Swallows, if he can pass the fitness test, will be in line to play this week. So that's positive. He's obviously bounced back from it, but at the same time, it's probably wiser to err on the side of caution when it comes to concussion, especially one that looked that bad.
Yeah, well, if you recall last year, Matt Rosa got concussed and then came back from concussion and then got concussed again. It just seemed to sort of bother him all season. And we're only just past the Kolajasny period of time, even though that turned out to be a sort of neck-related concussion symptoms. So, it's just one of those things. I don't think there was malice in the tackle, but it was a bloody hard tackle. And if you were to sort of go on that side of things to say that there was perhaps a bit of intent there, the fact that Cripps kind of did pin the arms and then pulled his hands away, and he didn't ride the tackle right into but it was still a hard enough tackle. I thought there was a free kick in it. It was in the back.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was very comparable to the Nick Natanui tackle, which got Natanui suspended earlier this year. Very, very close. I think just a couple of fractions difference, and that resulted in Cripps' possible suspension being thrown out. But one who didn't escape suspension was Stephen May. He was extremely aggressive in that last half, and he himself looked like he'd had a gutful of the performance of his teammates and took it out on Carlton players.
Yeah, look, May and Swallow and Harbrow are the only ones who showed any passion. Peter Wright kicked a couple of goals, and then they were from free kicks, and then he didn't do anything. May had a captain's game. Harbrow is the quintessential club leader, but he doesn't take on any sort of, he doesn't. He's a different kind of leader, isn't he? He's not going to go out and inspire the boys by yapping away, but he is going to lead the defence in his own way and do what he does. But yeah, look, Maisie, I don't think we can compare this to the 2 times that he got suspended and rubbed out for a long time in the past. I think bumping is a part of the game, and it just came down to the difference in their heights. If it was the other Curnow, everyone would have said it was a great bump, but the fact that May's 6'5", he just took him out. Simple as that. It wasn't more in it.
That has been a contentious thing over the years. I remember Buddy Franklin getting suspended because of his height when bumping a player. So it's obviously something that you've just got to consider. As far as the rest of the team, there wasn't too many other players that stood up. I can't really think of anyone. Lonergan impressed in the first half.
Yeah, but I mean, when our game plan involves Lonergan being free to gather 13 possessions in a quarter, and then you have to switch him on to Cripps, and I mean, they talked about him curbing the influence of Kennedy last week and curbing the influence of Cripps. Well, without Swallow to back him up, he had no hope in hell, and I felt sorry for him because Lonergan was on track for a 3-vote game.
Yeah, we seem to be trying everyone as a tagger this year. It was Tuke Miller earlier in the year, and he looked like a rolled gold tagger. Then they threw Sexton onto a bloke a few weeks later, and now it's Lonergan. Yeah,
well, actually, at one stage they had Tuke and Jesse both tagging, and it just took away. I mean, they got 24 and 22 possessions each. And you look at the little, the stats, underlying stats are that Lonergan was incredible he had 5 clearances in the first quarter, 7 overall. He had laid 9 tackles. Miller, similar figures. They both worked really hard, but their stats don't really show it, and their disposal efficiency doesn't show it, because the corollary of a hard tag is that you've got a really good player who's right next to you every time you go anywhere near the ball. So, Lonergan got his hands on the ball, and it was great. It was pretty clean in the first quarter, actually, and after that it was just scragging for the ball and just trying to hit it to advantage and not exactly hitting it to a teammate. Miller was much the same. The midfield is delicately balanced, and when we've got enough hard inside guys and a few other guys who can, run onto the ball, and guys like Lyons, who you wouldn't mind him rotating forward and having a rest in the forward line, but he can't bloody kick straight. Lyons did play well, but his kicking's just rubbish.
Well, all of our players' disposal efficiency is rubbish. I mean, Sexton had 38% disposal efficiency from 13 disposals. And then on the other hand, of all players, Sean Lemons has 90% disposal efficiency from 10 disposals as the most effective player on the night. I mean, 9 out of 10 of his passes hit targets. That's a bit surprising, because it must have been the only one that I saw him have a shot at goal and thought, why is this bloke even in our side? Yeah, exactly. But the thing with Lemons is his little pressure acts. If as we discussed a couple of weeks ago, if we've got a forward line with Darcy McPherson and Sean Lemons chasing down everything and putting opposition defenders under all sorts of pressure, the ball's going to get turned over, and you turn it over a couple of times a quarter in that forward 50, goals. Even if it's only 4 goals for the game. Well, 4 goals for this game would have made it a much bloody closer encounter, and a little bit of straighter kicking would have been a winning score. But God Almighty, he's got to go through a clinic to fix his kicking. After watching that game, I just about walked out and threw away my membership. I was that disgusted with the performance overall. Those boys, I'm sure they were trying. Look, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Sure, they were trying, but they didn't bring their A game. They didn't come prepared to fight tooth and nail like what Carlton did, and to be absolutely embarrassed on their home deck in front of 10,700 fans is just that we were beaten by 35 points by the only other worst side in the competition. at home. It's just pathetic. I mean, I'm going to go on a rant here, so just bear with me. I mean, I've already started. But, not once have we put in any effort, I think, this season in a game at Metricon. The Collingwood game, yes, we were competitive, but we got blown out of the water in one quarter, which blew out any hope for a Suns win. And then the only other game was against St Kilda, where we went to sleep at three-quarter time and coughed up an unlosable margin. It's really starting to aggravate me, and I don't think I'm going to see another Gold Coast Suns win this year. They can win on the road, but they can't seem to win at Metricon. Now, whether that comes to scheduling of games, whether night games are really the smartest thing for the Gold Coast community, maybe not, because we're only getting 10,000 fans, and I reckon 60% of those were Carlton supporters on that night, which would make 5 consecutive games at home where Gold Coast Suns supporters have not outnumbered rival supporters. I reckon even that Geelong game, it was 50-50. St Kilda game, around 50-50 as well. But definitely Collingwood, Essendon, and now Carlton, we are way behind. It's just really quite embarrassing, and it's really embarrassing to the Gold Coast community. So if you're listening and you didn't go to that game, or you know people that didn't go to that game that are members, ask them why the hell not. What is wrong with the Gold Coast community that they can't go out to a game of football on a perfect winter night of about 20 degrees to watch their team after they've just had the best win in their history? There is something seriously wrong with the Gold Coast community and the way they view sports. I'm really quite embarrassed by it.
So I have one question for you though, Shane. What is the best day of the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and what's the best time slot for the Suns to be playing? Because we know that there's TV deals and all that kind of stuff, and I'm not suggesting this is a reason why the Suns are playing badly or whatever, but we're talking about crowd figures here. If we want the best crowd figures, what's our ideal slot, and what does the club need to be demanding from the AFL to have the best time? So, factor in things here like you can't have a 1 o'clock game on a Saturday because people are taking their kids to and from sport and all that kind of stuff. And you have to play the bloody NEFL game at 9 o'clock in the morning. So, but what's the best time in your opinion? What are the best games that you've seen where top crowd, top time of day, good weather, and everyone goes home when it's still sunny or, when it's not too late at night?
Well, the best crowds I've ever seen were at Saturday night games when we were playing the big clubs. In our first few seasons, obviously, it was Geelong, it was Collingwood. Our twilight games seemed to be favoured amongst parents. And then, that's due to partly kids playing sport in the mornings. And then being able to bring the kids to the game and then getting them home in bed at a relatively decent time. I don't know. I've heard conflicting reports. People say they prefer twilight games. People say they prefer night games. Now, Sunday games are a potential thing, but for some reason we don't play too many Sunday games. I'm not sure exactly why that is. Maybe the AFL want to bury us in the 5 games a day on Saturday at the moment. Maybe that's the reason.
I think you're onto a good point there. In rugby league, they try to have one game at a time. They have 2 Friday night games. What do you reckon with the Friday night slot? Even if it was just for 3 games
I don't think the Suns are anywhere near ready to play a Friday night. We've been hearing media backlash all year about how Carlton are playing 5 Friday night games or 6 or whatever it was. And there is no way the Gold Coast Suns are ready to step up to a Friday night game. I would love to see a Friday night game. We've got a potential to play a Thursday night game before we play a Friday night game. But even that is still a long way off. Even with two games, I don't believe the AFL would put the Suns on a Friday night game.
That's interesting because from my perspective, and as you know, I'm a rugby league fan. if I did, like in the rugby league, they sometimes have the two games running at the same time, and other times they have one after the other, and one starts very very early, and the other one finishes quite late. You can't do that with Australian rules football because the game goes for much longer. But if you were going to have two games on at the same time, which they do have to do that anyway over the whole weekend, they often have clashes. Sometimes as many as three games going at once. So if it was Sydney versus the Suns or Greater Western Sydney or whatever, and then you just show those games live in those markets. Of course, with Foxtel and Channel 7 and whatever, everything gets played eventually, and everything's on Fox. And there's 4 games on free-to-air. So if you're going to have 2 games on a Friday night, and the ones you would put as clash games, just show them in Brisbane and Sydney and try and win a bit of the market share. To me, it makes sense. But as you say, though, we're not match of the round material. No way.
No, and I don't think anyone's craving to watch the Suns. Even local Gold Coast people that aren't avid Gold Coast Suns supporters, every weekend I get asked, how are the Suns going? They managed to win a game yet? So it's just a general consensus that the Gold Coast Suns aren't up to much, and until they are, people aren't really going to be interested in tuning in. I think that's the big issue at full stop with the Suns. They're not going to get crowd numbers. They're not going to get sponsorship. They're not going to get attention or players wanting to come to that club until they start performing. And it's a vicious cycle because we can't get those players. We can't perform until we get some of those things, and it's a very vicious cycle. As we've discussed before, the AFL needs to step in and fix the game. I don't think there is a problem with the rules. I think the problem is with the competition. So I think they need to stop trialing rules to make the game more appealing and focus on rising up the teams at the bottom of the competition to make the games more competitive, and then you'll have people watching.
Yeah.
So, but that's a whole story for another time.
Absolutely.
We are running short of time. We've got our interview with Callum Twomey coming up, but before we jump into that, let's breeze through the NEAFL game. Gold Coast Suns played Brisbane at Metricon Stadium and lost again by 12 points. It was 70-82. The highlight of the game was Symington with the 4 goals. He's coming back nicely. Do you want to run through some of the players that stood out to you?
Yeah. Look, the my boy Jacob Dawson, he was terrific. In my opinion, he's banging down the door of AFL selection. He's a guy who would come straight back into the team and actually, want to win games and want to go all day. He's been electric. Unfortunately for the selection committee, a lot of the better players in this game were, it's certainly of interest, but a lot of the better players were guys like Brodie Foster, Harry Symington, Connor Bedarick, Bailey Scott. These are guys who we may or may not draft. Symington's a top ager, so if we don't draft him now, he's gone. Probably somebody like Southport Sharks. Connor Bedarick we can't draft until next year. Bailey Scott might choose somewhere else. We'll find out from Callum what he thinks about the Bailey Scott situation. Although I will say another shining light for the Suns was Pierce Hanley. His rebound off halfback's just fantastic. You could see he was having a bit of fun, and I think that's one thing that the Suns players in the seniors team lack. Someone like Pierce Hanley is just so strong off halfback. Him and Harbrow in the same team hasn't happened very much because Hanley's been injured most of the time. But if those two could really, spark up a bit of a partnership, we could be seeing a lot more sort of transition, coast-to-coast transitions with, very enterprising play. So the final comment I'll make on the NEAFL, Shane, is the last time the Suns played the Lions in the NEAFL, the Suns scored 4 behinds and no goals, and the Brisbane team had something like 18 AFL listed players. So this time around, the Suns looked like they could win the game. The Lions just stayed in front. The Suns have a bye coming up this week, so even more grim when you think about the selection situation. If Dew's going to drop players, who's he going to pick?
Yes, let's lead into the injury report. As we've already discussed, Swallow looks like he'll be okay to play. It will come down to their decision on whether to play him or not. Yep. May is suspended for a week, so we can rule out May. And Rosa and Ballard look like they're out for 4 weeks. Rosa with an ankle sprain, it looks, a high ankle sprain. And Ballard seems to have a leg injury as well. There's a couple of players from the twos that could probably come in, but I guess you could just pick anyone from the one side to come out, can't you? I mean,
yeah.
Hanley and Ainsworth and Dawson all look like they're a good chance to slot straight in. The other one that's probably a bit more contentious is Michael Barlow. It seems pretty obvious now that there's something wrong with Michael Barlow and the selection committee, whether that's Stuart Dew or whether that's others at the club. Maybe they've stamped his papers and decided he won't be having a contract next year. And if that's the case, then you can pretty much rule out any chance of him playing seniors again this year. So I guess we'll find out this week just how close Michael Barlow is to playing, because if he is named, then maybe there's still a chance for him. But if he isn't, then I think we'd have to just write him off now and say that's it.
Yeah.
He's done for the year. He's done for the season.
I agree with you. I think you can add, Barlow, if, like you say, if he is not selected. Well, then with the number of injuries and with Dew saying that he's going to make changes, well, he can't come out and now just make forced changes. He needs to drop some guys who didn't perform. So, unfortunately, little Jacob Heron, who was brought in for a couple of games to try and add a bit of pace, well, he had 4 touches and only 2 of them were effective. You've got Will Powell, who had 9 touches and I think he might have had a goal, but he had 2 more shots on goal than missed, and only 6 of his touches were effective. You can't keep picking guys like that. They're great little 18-year-olds, but that's all they are. You've got to the 18-year-olds that we missed out on in Crossley and Ballard. They're a different story. So you've got to bring in Ainsworth for one of those guys, and you've got to bring Hanley for another one. You've got to bring in Dawson and think about putting someone else back in the NEAFL to pick up a bit of form. Jesse Joyce has been basically regressing all year, and that says a lot because he was very, very good, and so he's not putting in the same sort of performances that he was, and maybe a few weeks in the NEAFL or just the rest of the season in the NEAFL is what's needed for him. I thought Fiorini was rubbish on the weekend. He played much better the week before. I don't know what's wrong with him. Jack Bowes wasn't sensational, but he belongs in the team. What do we do? There was also talk, remember, last week of Stuart Dew saying to Scrimshaw that he's gonna get given a run, but then Scrimshaw had the same sort of flu that Callum Archie had, which put Archie out of the game entirely. So Archie's another one to come back. But what do you reckon? Is it time for Scrimshaw?
Well, he hasn't had an outstanding game, but he still got the 20 disposals and kicked a behind.
Yes, he did.
And the 4 marks. So 3 rebound 50s as well. I guess he's playing the same sort of role as Hanley. So unless they try and experiment and play him down forward, I'm not too sure where he fits in. I mean, maybe Jesse Joyce makes way. Jesse Joyce has been a bit ordinary lately, so Scrimshaw could probably replace him. But with May out, we're going to have to find a tall player, and I think all that's left now is Leslie. Okay, well that wraps up our NEFL coverage. So now is time for a very special moment on the GCSunscast as we welcome our first guest, Callum Twomey. Callum is a reporter for AFL.com.au and features on Future Stars. He specialises in the Phantom Form Guide and the Phantom Drafts articles which appear on the AFL website, and does quite a bit of work with the under-18 academies. Thanks for joining us, Callum.
No worries at all, guys. Pleasure to be here. Happy to chat about the Suns. It has been a tough year, but looking forward, there's a bit to like.
Yes, there certainly is. So let's start off with, how do you determine your Phantom Draft or Form Guide? Do you go by the best available player or what the club needs at the time? Starting with the Form Guide.
For every month after that, leading up to the draft, we do an update. So we did one after the championships finished about a month ago this year, and we'll do an update of that next week, I think, on AFL.com.au. So they're mainly my take on where I think, or who I think are the best 20 to 30 players in the draft pool this year and every year previously. So that's more my take. Where the Phantom Draft differs is that comes out 2 days before the draft, and that's I guess the more mock draft, and that's more of a look at where I think the players are going to go based on what I'm hearing, what I know, and conversations and information that I've picked up across the year and leading up to the draft. So that's where they differ. Obviously, it's a hard task trying to pick out who's going to go where come draft time, because everyone keeps their cards pretty close to their chest. But we do as best as we can every year, and it's a challenge, and it's getting harder because everyone wants a piece of it now. But it's always good fun to rank the players throughout the year, and then at the end of the year see where they end up and how close to the mark my rankings are in terms of the draft.
Well, you're doing a good job, so thanks for that. We always look forward to it. One of the things that I was surprised about earlier in the year, you showed up on a footy show of some type and you did quote, I think it was one of the King brothers is coming to the Suns. That was a Phantom Draft, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a Phantom Draft. So that was on Future Stars, which I'm on every week, every Sunday on Channel 9 here in Victoria. So I'm not sure if you guys have catch too much of that in Queensland, but it is available to watch online and everything like that. But that was a one-off sort of Phantom Draft in the middle of the year that we did, and I think I had might have been Ben King there. I can't remember now off the top of my head, one of them, but either of them would be a good fit for the Suns. That was more based at that point in the year based on needs, because it's hard at the midpoint of the year to know who's really looking at who and who likes who. So it's not, that one wasn't really based on too much information other than just who I think are the best players and a little bit of needs basis, particularly on the fact that it's most likely, I think, that Tom Lynch leaves the club, as I think most people think he will. So there's an opening there for another key forward or key position player to come into the club. So I can't remember off the top of my head which King I did have there, but either of them, they're pretty close, to be honest. There's not much difference between either of them.
Yeah, it does look likely Tom Lynch is going to leave the club. So at this stage, that would probably leave us with picks 2 and 3. But of course, the trade period can change, and who knows what you end up with at the end of the year. I mean, this time last year, we were talking about LDU, Luke Davies-Uniacke, coming to the Suns, and we ended up getting Lachie Weller.
Yeah.
But who do you think goes number 1 this year? Because if Carlton hold that pick, the Suns are likely going to get one of Walsh, Lukosius or Rankin out with pick 2 and possibly pick 3.
Yeah, they're in a good spot. I mean, obviously you don't want to lose your co-captain and you don't want to lose one of your best players to another club, but given the season that they've had, I guess at least they're going to get pretty well compensated with such an early selection. So that one that gives them a good hand to go to the draft with, the trade period with. So if there is a chance or opportunity to get a player into the club who's a star, then they have a real chip in their hand to throw at another club to make the trade happen. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think many players, in all honesty, at this point are going to want to go to the Suns at this point. So that means that they can go to the draft. And with that draft pick, I think that Carlton, it's a tough call at the moment, but I think that if I had to bet on it one way or the other, I'd say Sam Walsh is probably the leading contender at pick 1. I think he fits on a lot of fronts. And that would leave, obviously, the likes of Jack Lukosius, a key forward, or Max King, a key forward, Ben King, a key forward and key back, Bailey Smith, a midfielder / halfback. Isaac Rankin, a small forward / midfielder, all in the mix there to be the Suns selection. So, look, they're going to get a pretty good couple of players with any way they go there. But I think the one that would be perfect for the Suns, and perfect for anyone really, but given the Suns' plight, I guess, over the past few years, I think the one that would be perfect would be Sam Walsh if he got there. And if he does get past the Blues to pick one, which is still a chance of happening, I wouldn't say it's a certainty by any means that he goes to pick one. But if he does get past the Blues, then I'd say the Suns would definitely jump in at 2 or 3 because he'd be too good to pass up. From a playing point of view and also just from a character point of view, he's a star.
So if in the event that Carlton do pick Walsh, if live trading is in place, Adelaide could more than likely come into Gold Coast and offer quite a number of mid-first round draft picks for the option to pick up Lukosius. Is there anyone around that mid-range that would suit the Suns?
There's some good players in there. I mean, I like Chase Jones, who's a midfielder from Tassie. Suns have obviously gone pretty hard at Tasmanians over the past. I think Scotty Clayton used to like picking up a few Tasmanians here and there and putting them on the list. Who else could be in that range? Jai Caldert's a midfielder who might be in the first 15. He's a pretty tough on-baller. He just came back from a hamstring injury on the weekend, played at school level, so he's one that could be in that mix there. Excuse me. Who else could be in there? I think there's a few. I mean, Zach Butters is a smaller type who will miss the rest of the year with injury, with shoulder injury, but he has shown some talent across his period as well this season. So, look, there's 3 or 4 names who could be in the mix there. Personally, I'm not sure that I'd do a trade like that. Pick 2 for 2 picks inside the first 20 or whatever it is that Adelaide could throw it. I'm not sure Adelaide's picks at the moment are good enough to warrant that trade, but that's just me.
Okay. And Tom, you said you had a question regarding mature age talent?
Yeah, so Cal, this year or last year's draft, we saw Geelong pick up Tim Kelly, and he's just been outstanding for them. Are there any Tim Kellys in the waffle or the sandful likely to bob up this year in the draft?
No, there aren't, I don't think. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because last year was such a success in terms of the mature ages, led by Tim Kelly. Liam Ryan's done some really good things at West Coast, and Bailey Fritsch as well at Melbourne has become a key player for them in his first season, having played at their feeder club, Casey, the past little bit. So there's been a good standard of mature ages come into the club, but I'm not sure the clubs that have got them. But this year, I'm not sure they've got that sort of players. The 2 that were invited to the NAB AFL Draft Combine are the 2 standouts in that front. So they are Josh Corbett, who's a player from Victoria in the VFL. He's kicked a lot of goals at VFL level this year. He's a powerful forward, about 190 centimetres. So he's one that's sort of caught the interest of clubs. And also Shane McAdam from the Sample, who's an option there, a smaller forward who's shown a lot of pressure too. So he's someone who's got some good bloodlines. Yeah, exactly. So related to the McAdams who played previously in the VFL or AFL clubs down here. So they've got some links, those 2. They've got some interest. They have to get 4 or 5 nominations from AFL clubs to be picked at the NAB AFL Draft Combine. So there's certainly some people watching them. Also, there's an opportunity. I think we'll see a few more names come out once the state combine testing lists come through in the next few weeks. So they're the main 2 at the moment, though, I think. And Corbett probably looks like the one who's going to be first picked.
Yeah, well, we're quite interested in how the Suns Academy players go. So a little bit of a surprise to me was Bailey Scott. We know he's going to be playing AFL next year somewhere, and I'll ask you about him in a moment. But Dirk Conan was the second player who, he's had at least 4 AFL clubs, nominate him, but not Caleb Graham, who, for those who watched the NEFL quite closely and the national championships, he's started well. Conan kind of shaded him this year, really, but he starred at the national championships 2 years in a row. He's been playing NEFL. Why do you think he's not so popular with the rest of the AFL clubs?
Yeah, I mean, he's probably got a little bit of a knock on his kicking, Graham, but he can read the ball pretty well across half back, as you said, key back, and pretty versatile in that role. But I think Conan's ahead of him. I do think that a bid most likely will come on Conan probably later in the piece, but there aren't too many 195 centimetre talls, so that will give Graham a chance, and there's still a chance the Suns still take him, and they don't need a bid on him. They don't need anyone else to like him. They just have to. So There's still a chance they do that. There's some good, obviously, bloodlines with Conan. I think his sister played for the Lions AFLW competition, and his other sister played netball at a pretty high level too. So there's some good bloodlines there, but I think Dirk Conan's probably carved out more interest from AFL recruiters, probably just a little bit more athletic, I think, and shapes more as a defender with that size and movement. So I think he's a little bit ahead of Graham personally, and his improvement this year would probably suggest that he's gone ahead of him.
Well, Graham's been playing ruck in the NEFL, which is quite a strange tactic. But then again, the Suns do not have any healthy ruckmen apart from the guys who are running around. I mean, Leslie was recruited as a ruckman, but they don't have any tall defenders anyway, unless you count Conan and Graham. So someone's got to do it. As I mentioned before, Bailey Scott, he's the one. When do you think he's got to make? I mean, Nick Blakey's already nominated Sydney, and he had 3 choices. When do you think Bailey Scott will actually make his decision, and who do you think it'll be?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? Because Blakey was off the board pretty early. Look, and that's probably, in some regards, they're a little bit different because Blakey has shaped as a top 10 pick for a long time. I don't think the same sort of status sits with Bailey Scott, although he has had a really good year and had a good championships for the Allies. But I don't think it's quite as obvious with Bailey. If I had to bet on it now, and I'm not allowed to bet on footy, so I'm not going to, but if I had to bet on it, I'd say the Suns are a little bit ahead, but only marginally. I'd say if I had to order it, I'd say Suns 1, 2 Geelong and 3 North. But look, that's just at a guess and out speaking to people here and there. That's not suggesting that any decision is imminent, and I don't think a decision will be made before the end of the season for him.
Right.
I don't think he's been doing any media. I don't think that's sort of been a bit of a directive from him. He's not going to do any media or be asked about it, but obviously at the draft combine, everyone's up for grabs. So we might get an update at that point, at the start of October, what he's planning to do and what he's thinking. But he doesn't have to make a decision before until a month before the draft. So at that point, he can make a call. And even then, you can put sort of a next best option in your preferences, I guess. So like Bailey Rice did a couple of years ago when he chose St Kilda over Carlton. So look, There's no rush at the moment. He doesn't have to do it for a little while, and I don't think any of the clubs in the meantime are really putting any pressure on. They're pretty respectful of that. So he has had a good year. I think he gets taken somewhere inside the first couple of rounds, probably in the top 40. I'm not sure exactly where there. He's a good runner. He works really hard. He uses the ball pretty well. He's pretty small and slight for a midfielder, and will take a little bit of time on that front. But there's a bit to work with there with Bailey Scott for sure, and he's a really good kid too.
Yeah. Oh, look, I watched the NEFL each week, and he had a passage of play on the weekend that made me think he's AFL ready. I thought that before as well, and you're right. Just a couple of pre-seasons in the gym, and he'll be not necessarily elite, but you've got to have your next level below elite, don't you? I just have one final question. The Suns Academy has an under-19s sort of age group, and so the bottom ages at the Suns, obviously this year, Connor Bedarik's been terrific. There may be a few players who come into consideration for getting selected either by the Suns or have a rival bid on them. Do you rate any of the under-19s in the Suns Academy of being a chance of making an AFL list?
The under-19s, are we talking like the guys who are eligible for next year's draft?
Sorry, no, missed out on.
Missed.
Like they were eligible last year, missed out, and they're playing this year in the NEFL. I think a few of them were selected for the Allies, but didn't get too much playing time. So guys like Timokoy Bowie, Emmanuel Baru, who's
Symington.
Yeah, Harry Symington didn't play national championships this year, but he's come back from injury and kicked a few goals on the weekend. You've got probably 12 players, I think, who are in that the slightly older group, probably similar to a Josh Jasko, who was a top ager that we picked up last year. Yeah,
no, I haven't heard anything to suggest that those guys are going to get a chance after being overlooked. So, and to be honest, these are the sort of ones that, unless the Suns have shown a lot of interest, if you're a club out there and you like someone's progress as an overager, you're probably going to keep it pretty quiet as well. So there's probably not going to be a lot of talk about those overages unless they're really, really starring. So I haven't heard anything to suggest they're going to get a chance, those guys. It's not to say they definitely won't. But look, there are a couple on the horizon, as you did say. I mean, Connor Butterick, member of the AFL Academy, and looks pretty good for next year. And shown a lot of form at NEFL level too, which has been good. And obviously Ace, who we've all heard about, Buago Owe. I think that's how you pronounce his name, out of Papua New Guinea. You would have seen him play a little bit too, I imagine. He's pretty tenacious with his tack on the ball. And obviously Braden Crossley's got a younger brother too, who I watched play while up at the Gold Coast, actually, for the under-16s in Ashton. So he's eligible for the 2020 draft. So not quite as big as Braden, though.
No, different body sizes, aren't they? It'd be quite interesting. A bit like the Curnow brothers, who are a bit of a hot topic up here at the moment.
Very different. So Braden's been good. He's probably surprised me a little bit. It probably didn't show him enough attention last year in some ways. But look, he's done a pretty good job coming through and making an impact at AFL level this season.
So just one last question. Do you think Dirk Conan will be a bit like Braden Crossley and sort of last until the third round before anyone bids on him?
Yeah. I don't think there'll be an issue in terms of getting a bid on him inside the first 50. And if it is going to be thereabouts, I don't think he's going to attract a bid inside that top 40. And after that, it's pretty much just pay with your next pick as well. Given the discount you get for an academy player, it's pretty much just pay with your next pick, and it doesn't cost you too much.
Would you say that's the same with Caleb Graham?
Well, I'm not sure if a bid will come for Caleb Graham. He might come for free at the end of the draft, or maybe as a rookie. That might be where he fits in if they like him enough.
Interesting. I was more going to talk in that direction. Yeah, Caleb Graham or any other Suns. We seem to think that it'll be the top three of Scott, Conan, and Graham, but Scott might not figure in there. Do you see any other Suns Academy players who could potentially be, if not national draft, then potentially rookie drafted?
Well, I mean, they had Matthew Conroy, who was part of the Talls camp earlier in the year. He's a ruckman, but whether he's going to be tall enough at that sort of level to be a ruckman at the next level is the question there. I think he's not quite 200 centimetres, so as much as he plays well around the ground, he might be someone they look at that point. But other than that, I think it's those main three that you guys have spoken about and we've spoken about, who will be the academy guys to watch for on draft night.
Yeah, well, the word on the street is that Bailey Scott's family are very, very keen for him to remain on the Gold Coast. So, as you say, he's the Suns would be sort of perhaps 40% likely, but it seems like the locals on the coast are a bit more optimistic about it. Yeah,
I mean, I hope in some ways I hope he does, but definitely for you guys. But look, he's a good player, so. You can always do it. Good players who work really hard, and having been up at the Suns a couple of weeks ago, I managed to spend a bit of time around the club and speak to a few people. And look, it's been a difficult season, but I think there's some light at the end of the tunnel. And we've spoken to a few of the younger players as well. I had a chat with Jack Bowes and Will Powell as well, who's probably exceeded a few expectations in his first year. And Bosey, before he got hurt, was tracking pretty well too. It's good to see Will Brodie come in recent weeks, and Benny Ainsworth hopefully will be back this week from injury and his time in the NEFL. So I think there's a bit there to work with. It's just a matter of keeping him on board and I guess making him pretty confident about the future.
Yeah, you've mentioned some of the young guys there, Ainsworth, Powell, etc. There's been a lot of talk about Brodie and Scrimshaw and whether they fit into the club, as they just haven't seemed to have the level of game time these other guys have had. Do you think these guys are performing below they were expected at draft, or is this about right?
Well, it's funny. I mean, I would have thought Will would have a little bit more game time than he has had. I don't know. He's the type of guy, and having got to know him pretty well, I know he's the type of guy who would want to get there in a rush and want to get there as quick as he can. He's a competitor, and he would have, in some ways, hated seeing a lot of guys he was drafted alongside last year playing more than he was. But I think as long as he's playing, then he's going to be happy. Will, and it's good to be seeing him out there the last few weeks. And he played really well against the Swans, like a few of them did. And his past few weeks has been pretty interesting. So look, I think he's more likely to stay. And Scrimshaw, I know he's contracted for another couple of years. So if any trade has to happen, or he wants to come back to Victoria, then the Suns, hopefully for their sake, would want to get some recompense, because obviously he's pick 7 only a couple of years ago. So from their perspective and the Suns' perspective and other clubs' perspective, they want to get him out of there, prize him out of there, then they're going to have to give up something to get him, because he's definitely very talented. He's been playing some good footy. I understand it, off half-back through the midfield in the NEFL. So we'll wait and see. Hopefully he gets a bit of a shot towards the end of the year, a couple of weeks here and there.
So when Scrimshaw was drafted, he was always expected to be a bit more of a project player, a guy that takes a little bit longer to develop, wasn't he?
Well, he missed a lot of footy through injury, and he got hurt a lot. So, but yeah, I agree. He probably was that way. He was lanky. Took a little bit of time to sort of find his spot at TAC Cup level. But his ball use off half back, and as an under 16, he just looked like Grant Birchall playing that sort of sweeping role as a tall, lanky left footer who used the ball well and could pinpoint blokes and really set up the play. So if he comes good, then there's a lot there to work with. There's definitely a lot of talent there with Jack.
Yeah, he has looked good in the NEFL games he's played, but unfortunately, like you said, he does seem to be a bit injury prone. He's had a couple of injuries this year already. What other players at the Suns do you think that we've recently drafted, do you think has exceeded expectation? I know Charlie Ballard took a lot of us by surprise earlier this year.
Yeah, I was a fan of Charlie last year. I was pretty surprised he got to where he did in the draft. I know the Suns were pretty interested in him. If for some reason they were scooped on Will Powell, I think they had him in their sights at that pick 19. But yeah, he's been good. I didn't expect Will Powell to play as much as he has this year. I know it's only been a few weeks here or there, but he's shown a bit and hasn't looked overawed at all. He's pretty courageous for a pretty skinny little kid. He's very enthusiastic though and very likeable. So I think the signs there are good. So he's probably exceeded expectations. But even dating back to sort of 2014, Touk Miller, if he went to a Victorian club, I think a lot of people would sort of rave and talk a little bit more about Touk, because he's become a really consistent player and one of the best leaders at the club. Even Braden Friorini, I know he's picked 20, so it's not like he was a late pick, and you expect your pick 20s to be good players, but he's a leader as well, a young leader at the club, and really well respected. And it's just a shame that injuries hurt him a little bit this season.
Thanks for joining us, Callum. It's been a pleasure having you on, and you've given us some great insight into the youth currently at the Suns and potentially coming into the Suns in the next year.
No worries. Happy to join the podcast, and I hope I was of some sort of interest. And good luck with the show.
No worries. Thanks, Callum.
Thanks very much, Callum. You've answered a bunch of our questions and that we've been wondering aloud about on and off we could call it the air. So thanks very much. You've given us a lot of great insight.
No stress at all. Thanks, guys.
So once again, thanks, Callum Twomey, for joining us. Let's quickly look at the Melbourne game this weekend. It's on at 3:20 on Sunday. Do we have a chance, Tom? Is there any chance we can upset Melbourne?
Well, we said that we had 1% chance of beating the Swans and went down to the SCG and spanked them. Let's say we have a 0.5% chance of beating the Demons. I highly rate the Demons. I think they're going to win the premiership, actually. The Tigers are really good at playing on the MCG, but so are the Demons. But I wonder, Shane, is the Demons' home crowd going at the MCG this week going to exceed the Suns' home crowd at Metricon? Can 10,000 Melburnians be asked to go to the MCG to watch the Demons and Suns? That's my question.
I don't know. What's the weather like?
Look,
Melbourne look like they're on the cusp of making finals for the first time in, I don't know, a decade or something. So I think the Melbourne fans will be out there in droves supporting their team, lapping it up. But it doesn't look good for the Suns. Let's hope I'm wrong. I was wrong about the Sydney game, but like I said, I think we've used up all of our aces, and we're just waiting for the season to end because there's not much more left going on. All right, well, that wraps up the GCSunscast for another week. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to hearing from you guys during the week, and listen to us again next week. Have a good night.
See you later.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the GCSunscast. If you like what you hear, please get involved in our small community over on bigfooty.com on the Gold Coast board. Chat with myself, Sunners, and Tom, 17er, as well as dozens of other Gold Coast fans. You can reach me on Facebook or Twitter at 32bitshane or email me 32bitshane@gmail.com with any queries. Leave a comment or review on iTunes and SoundCloud, or a donation on Patreon. Just search GCSunscast. Donations are in US dollars and will go towards reliable tech and hosting the podcast so listeners have access to our earlier episodes. Thanks again. Go Suns!
Yeah.